Hello, I'm Alex Mulcahy. I'm the publisher of Grid Magazine, and I'm here today with Alon Abramson of the Philadelphia Energy Authority. Thank you, Alon, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and for the opportunity to talk about the work that I'm doing and that Philadelphia Energy Authority is doing. One note before we jump into the real discussion here, I'm working on a really exciting program they're calling Built to Last, and it's looking at how we can go further in helping low-income Philadelphians who have homes in disrepair or some amount of deferred maintenance just because of the cost of repairs, and low income makes it tough. So we're going to be layering together the programs that are doing an amazing job already serving these families, so they can work in concert, take care of the baseline home repair needs, and then we can come in bringing in additional funding and do the work to make these homes more energy efficient and healthier. So again, that's called Built to Last, and I think that's going to actually be one of our opportunities to introduce heat pumps and electrification, and that kind of thing that we'll be talking about.
Let's talk about electrification. Why is electrification a priority for the PEA right now?
Let me tell you, Alex, I wrote an essay about this just now in prepping for this call, so I'll try to be brief about it. But the answer is that there's a whole bunch of reasons, and I think we can start from like the most existential, right? I mean, climate change is probably the biggest driver. It should be to push us to electrify now. We need to move away from burning fossil fuels in our home, and we need to then transition the grid itself. If we're switching from fossil fuels to electric, we need to make sure the electric we produce is itself clean. But we obviously need, even if the grid was 100% solar and we're still burning natural gas and oil at home, we're not quite all the way there, right? So we need to address all parts of this puzzle. And I just want to note that we're talking about a building electrification. At the same time, we need to talk about the transportation sector, so electric cars, electric trucks, and the industrial sector, which is its own challenge. But I think beyond the climate importance, which I do not want to minimize, it is like probably the biggest reason we want to do this. There are a couple of other immediate reasons, and one of them is health. So we're burning natural gas or oil in a home for heating, for water, for cooking, and that's shown to introduce some amount of emissions into the home, both in the form of particulates and combustion byproducts like NOx and SOx. And there's also a very proven link that the higher rates of those indoor environmental pollutants, that those are causing health issues, especially for children. I hope that people know, I don't know if it's common knowledge to everybody, but Philly has a real crisis in asthma, especially for low-income children that are living in low-income homes. In some places, it's 1 in every 4 children. There's West Philly is one of those areas. So, this is not the entire story, but it's definitely a contributor. We do a lot in introducing ventilation into the home, making sure that all those pollutants are taken out of the home. But obviously, it's much better to not have them there to begin with. And even if we do get them out of the home, this all ends up contributing to the pollution, the general kind of miasma of negative air quality in our neighborhoods. Obviously it comes from cars and trucks and buses and the industries in the city, but what we're doing in our homes is also contributing. And I think another huge motivator here is resilience. And we, in the longer term, we're talking about getting heat pumps, to supplement, to replace our fossil fuels for both heating and for hot water, and pairing that with solar and then battery backup. And that's going to do a lot, right? That's going to help us hedge against grid interruptions. It can even help us transition away from fossil fuels in the grid. And that is kind of the long-term vision and what we need to be focusing on. But in the short term, we can get these heat pumps installed in homes. And that's going to help us a lot in kind of addressing the rise in heat, basically in our summer hot weather, especially for vulnerable communities. There's some I'm sure you've seen this as well, that there's some neighborhoods that are 20 degrees hotter than others on our hottest days. And greening the city is critical here, getting more trees, getting more green space. That's going to obviously help reduce those temperatures. But it's also really critical that we get access to air conditioning to families. I think, again, here, the Office of Sustainability is doing an amazing job in creating, these cooling centers. Obviously, right now during COVID, that's been really hard, but moving forward, that's going to be helpful. But there's a lot we can do for these individual homes. Alex, as you mentioned, you're looking at your air conditioning as a reason to get heat pumps. But the listeners here should know that the benefit of the heat pump technology is that it can do both. It's moving heat from one place to another. So whether it's cold outside and we need to heat our home, we can pull heat from that cold air and bring it into our homes. But if it's hot in our homes and we want to cool off, we can pull that heat out of our homes and push it outside. So we have one unit that can basically do both of those things. There's a huge opportunity, especially for folks who are heating right now with oil and may just have window units, to save a lot of money and energy in making this transition as well. So that's one of the things we're really looking at here. So the why now is so many reasons, basically.
Mm-hmm. I'm just personally beginning to investigate this, but so my understanding of the technology for a row home is that there is a unit that's outside, and then there are a series. It would be ductless vents. So you're able to heat and cool certain sections of the house as you wish. But I guess what I thought was that the air that's brought in is then conditioned through that unit that's hanging on the wall. So is that different than you were talking about, like pulling air out? Is that
well, pulling heat out of the air is really more of what I mean, not necessarily moving the air around. So let's back up, right? There's a couple of different technologies that can be put in place. What you're describing as these ductless mini splits, which you're right. There's an external unit, and then that's connected. There's refrigerant lines basically running to and from those wall units, and then there's that refrigerant circulating around, and that's where the heat transfer happens between the compressor outside and the units inside that move air around. Now, there's also technology that's available to essentially retrofit an existing forced air system. So I think in Philly, we're in an interesting position where a lot of our homes don't have any ductwork, right? They're like old row homes with radiant heat systems, and so that's why I think in the city we talk a lot about these ductless mini splits that just are wall units that will do air conditioning and heating for you, but they're kind of a standalone. What you can do as well is hook up to an air handler. If you have an existing furnace, you put a coil attached to that and then run refrigerant there, and that heat, that basically is a central system, which will still function similar to what your furnace does right now. But instead it has a compressor outside that's doing the heating for you. And I should note too, a lot of the reason this is all, we're pushing for this now, and we're talking about electrification now, is that the technology is really advanced. It used to be that you needed to have some kind of backup heating source, so we would look at heat pumps maybe just for air conditioning, because once it got really cold, below 40 degrees, which happens a lot in Philly, it's happening right now, then that heat pump basically starts relying on like an electric coil, or you start burning gas or whatever to make sure you're still heating. Now we have these cold climate heat pumps, and they can go down to -10, -20 degrees, and without relying on any sort of backup system. And so now, the technology has arrived. Obviously, people are getting more familiar and kind of trust this technology to keep them comfortable, right, and provide enough heating for them. I think there's a lot more HVAC technicians that are familiar with the technology and getting it out, to homes in Philly. So it's all kind of aligning. All these things have to be in place for this to be the right time. Does that make sense
And
though? So, I think what you were thinking
yeah,
of
it
is
does.
definitely probably the most likely situation that we'd see in a traditional Philly row home, just because of what's
Mhm.
already there.
And now the advice that I'm hearing is, so I have gas, radiant heat, or boiler, and with radiators. And what I'm hearing is that getting this electric solution is a great complement, like over 40 degrees, as you said. That's
Yeah,
true, right?
I think that that's still the situation we're in, where the technology, the cost of your new heat pump system, and then coupled with the cost of electricity, just the fact that electricity ends up being more expensive as a fuels, kind of as a fuel source than gas, means that right now it could be a lot cheaper to operate a gas system and then maybe use the heat pump for air conditioning. We don't know what how things will evolve. We don't know what natural gas prices will do in the future. So there's definitely still a lot of questions on what's going to, when's the best time to switch to a heat pump if you're already using gas. The clear scenario is when you're working on oil as your base. At that point, it's clear that going to a heat pump is going to save you energy, going to save you in cost versus, switching that over to natural gas and then trying to add, air conditioning on the side. But yes, if you're currently using a natural gas boiler, it might make more sense for you to just stick with it. And you can
But just financial sense. Just
financial sense
financial, because I
only,
mean,
yes. And
yeah.
I think there is something to say that, if you're already going solar, that's obviously, you're already kind of factoring that into the cost of your electric. And that return on investment period, if you account for the increased electric use for the heat pump, I think if you design your system appropriately, so it's covering all that, you're still going to look at 8 or so years for paying back your solar, and then the rest of your generation is essentially free, right? Because it's a 25-year system. So I think, yeah, there is always this challenge between initial cost, operating cost, and just thinking through these kind of complexities and interactions. And it's not easy. I mean, that's kind of one of the challenges with energy stuff, is that it's, you start to get the financing out and thinking through payback periods, and it's a lot for a homeowner to kind of think through.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too much, and this is in general, I just feel like too much responsibility rests on the shoulders of consumers.
Yes, I agree.
There are well-intentioned people who don't have the time to do this research, and or they might, and then they don't have the money to do the system. So
yeah,
not much you can do about that.
In the short term, no, but I think we have a lot of great experience that came with what we've done with Solarize. Again, where I think solar, we can say a lot of the same things, right? There's a lot of uncertainty about what technology, how to go about getting solar, what's a good deal, and just like all these kinds of questions that I think we were able to address with the Solarize model, basically bringing some certainty to who the installers are going to be, that we vetted them, what the technology is going to be, we vetted that. So I think I can envision, PA kind of approaching heat pumps in a similar way. And I think the work that we're looking to do, with Built to Last in this low income housing space, and especially working with households that are currently burning oil, that's really expensive, starting with them, figuring out what the best practices are in the technology, getting more vetted contractors on the scene, all that is going to help a lot with this market and with the decision making for the kind of regular folks. So yeah, there's too many question marks right now for, I think, people to confidently go forward, but I think now is still the right time, right? I think there's still a lot we can do as individuals.
So with the Built to Last, this is a question I wanted to ask about the PA in general, but maybe Built to Last specifically, is are you doing insulation? Like how big a piece of the puzzle is insulation for you?
Great question. And I think that piece of the puzzle may be the critical piece to making heat pumps, and electric-based heating affordable, and like especially competitive with gas. So our intention with Built to Last is to basically go into a home, assess everything that needs to be done in that home, whether it's weatherizing, whether it's some basic systems thing or like some code compliance problem, and then just in capturing all of that, all those needs, and then addressing as much of that as possible. So that means, if we're looking at, let's just take a good example of a house with like a roof leak. Obviously, addressing that roof leak is key, but then also removing any mold that might have resulted from that. While we're looking at the roof, let's make sure that space is insulated. And then while we're in the home in general, let's make sure that all the weatherization that's possible can be done. I think, it's always really hard to add more insulation, except for in the roof cavity, but we can do a lot by just sealing up a home, right? And like getting it as airtight as possible. That's kind of step one. And that all translates into how much heat or air conditioning needs to be put into that home, right? That the load on the home, and that in turn kind of drives what sizing the heat pump might, how big that heat pump might need to be and how much it'll cost to actually operate that unit. So, the worst thing we can do, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, is, put in an energy efficient piece of HVAC equipment into a home that's really not airtight, right? That's not weatherized well. You're basically dumping a bunch of high efficiency heating into a sieve, right? Like that, you're just losing all that. That's not energy efficient by any means. So yeah, we always want to be looking at weatherizing, kind of sealing up spaces as the first step. And then from there, looking at, basically doing the math for the owners to figure out, is this a good investment? Maybe we can give you the unit for free, through grants, with Built to Last, but is it going to cost you more to operate in the long term? Like that's not something we want to do to an owner, right? So we want to make sure the outcome that we're looking for from this program is that it's, going to be cheaper for them to operate their home, not more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you very much, Alon, for talking with me today. This is Alon Abramson, who is a program manager at the Philadelphia Energy Authority. And thank you all for being with us today here on the internet somewhere, maybe Facebook. Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much.